This is going to be the third in our series of Southface Session Sarasota. So excited to bring this to you today, the third in our series. You can certainly go back to YouTube and our YouTube channel at Southface and find some of our previous videos if you'd like to go back and look at our legislative update or some thoughts we have on federal funding and available funding for workforce development training, of which we'll build off a little bit of that today. But appreciate everyone's time. Really looking forward to share some things we've been learning about wastewater treatment and opportunities for energy efficiency and wastewater treatment, climate resiliency. So thank you so much for being here. My name is Will Collier. I'm the interim director of the advocacy program for Southface. Southface is a sustainable nonprofit that focuses on healthy, happy, and efficient homes, communities, and buildings. We work both in Atlanta, Georgia, where our headquarters is, and we also have a second office based in Sarasota, Florida, where we work on a variety of issues ranging from energy democracy and justice to energy efficiency and wastewater treatment plants. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the material. Today's presentation is called When Wastewater Goes Green in a Good Way. And so excited to share some thoughts with you here. Let's see if I can switch slides. Here we go. Okay, so here's our roadmap for our presentation today. We're going to talk mainly about four broad categories. Number one is just contextualizing wastewater and wastewater treatment within climate and climate resilience. So what can we do to sort of meet the moment? To do so, we'll need to dive into the anatomy of wastewater treatment, better understand how energy use is allocated across the life cycle of wastewater treatment facilities. And by doing that, we might be able to find points of intervention where potential and future funding could be applied in order to increase both the efficiency and resiliency of these systems. And then we'll turn to a few exciting case studies that we've been following and that we found to exemplify some of the things we're going to talk about here and think about the ways that it could be applied more broadly, especially in the Gulf Coast region of Florida, where the intersection of the coast, seawater infiltration and wastewater treatment facilities and extreme weather events all come together and coalesce in ways that are extremely important for climate resiliency in communities. Let's start with the big picture. So wastewater energy use, very broadly speaking, in general terms, consumes a lot of energy. At a national level, it's approximately 3 to 4% of all energy use in the United States, or electricity use in the United States, rather. And at a municipal level, that can range anywhere from 10 to 40%, depending on the characteristics of a given municipality, the wastewater treatment plants, et cetera. So considerable energy use goes into treating water. It's an area where municipalities have significant opportunity to reduce energy costs and energy burdens associated with those burdens, perhaps with making it a different term than we use in the residential setting, but thinking about the ways that energy costs and energy efficiency can help wastewater treatment plants to reduce overall costs for municipalities and make them more resilient in the process. So there's a lot of both direct and indirect benefits that would come from doing so, as we see here in a recent EPA report talking about energy efficiency and wastewater treatment. I won't list them all here, as you can see, but economic development tied to workforce development that can go into training needed for new equipment, new infrastructure, new operation and processes of wastewater treatment plants, I think is a big and important part of this. As we've talked about previously, and as we see with a lot of federal funding coming down, both through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we see opportunities to add workforce development and training as a component to many of the sector-specific grants that are coming out of the federal government to ensure that those monies can actually be implemented by having the workforce available to do so. In addition, lots of other benefits, of course, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, public health amongst them. Since I've been spending a lot of time recently working with coalitions and networks that talk about the sustainable development goals and try to think about a common language through which we can discuss and talk about local climate resiliency. I've put in here the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that I think most directly relate to some of the things we're talking about today, this intersection of wastewater, energy, and infrastructure development. There's at least 6 sustainable development goals that are entangled in these processes, be they focusing on upgrading industry and infrastructure in communities and cities for climate resilience, be it related to efficiency in water and energy use for clean water and sanitation, and the impacts that has on overall energy use of a given municipality or state or country. Then, of course, the economic opportunities that go along with that. So excited to think about this in terms of that framework and what projects and sources of funding might hit different pieces of these goals, but also collectively, sort of integratively address quite a few of them. To provide a little bit of wastewater context here, especially in the state of Florida, I just wanted to point out a few things, neat little GIF here of some recent wastewater spill hotspots that have happened. And you can obviously see the Gulf Coast has been seeing considerable wastewater spills along Florida and will continue to do so, especially if you look at the 2 graphs on the right. You can see impacted Florida waterways by wastewater spills. On the bottom right, you see projected population growth for the top 20 Florida counties. And you can see that there's not a single one of those counties that is expected to have a reduction in population growth. And so energy use in the wastewater sector is anticipated to decrease some 20% with these changes to population growth, with increased water demand, and with increased needs for water quality. So this is an opportune moment to potentially take available federal climate funding and other sources of funding focused on climate and energy, apply them to the sector that can have huge payoffs, especially for municipal administrations. So next, let's dive into the anatomy of a wastewater treatment facility to better understand where energy use occurs along these processes, where there might be important points of intervention, where we might match funding to those bottlenecks or points of intervention. This is a really great graphic we were able to take from Los Angeles County's wastewater treatment division, and it does a great job of sort of, in general terms, summarizing what the different components of a wastewater treatment facility. What you really need to take away are these 3 primary sort of areas or components of this process where different operations occur and different energy uses associated with these processes. So you can broadly think of them, for those of you that don't have a ton of exposure to wastewater treatment. This website does an excellent job of trying to relate the processes that you see along this chain within a wastewater treatment facility to the natural processes that they are in some way, shape, or form trying to mimic in order to treat wastewater. So at the beginning of these systems, in the primary treatment phase, you have these really long concrete channels and holding tanks, places where solid materials can precipitate out. In the secondary treatment phase, you have these aeration tanks where they're churning them. What's the word I'm looking for? Putting bubbles into them, creating aerations to promote environments for bacterial growth and for the breakdown of biosolids. And then finally, there's a tertiary stage where you move into using either chemical or organic processes to deal with suspended materials still in the water. At this point, you can also use UV light or other chemicals as a way to treat the water as well. And so I'll let you read these more in more detail after we share our presentation. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but the presentation and all the hyperlinks in this presentation will be available along with the YouTube video. So we'll let you explore that later, but it's neat to think about how wastewater treatment plants in very real ways are mimicking natural processes. Here's a big picture, bird's eye view of a wastewater treatment facility, just to give you an idea of some of the scale of these facilities and where these processes are playing out across a landscape. This is a really unique case study that we'll come back to in a little bit, but you can see that these primary, secondary, and tertiary processes are occurring across the footprint of this wastewater treatment facility that has implications for resiliency, for pollution, and for energy efficiency. So let's look at some potential points of intervention, some funding that could be associated with that. So this is a breakdown of energy use from a specific wastewater treatment facility in Columbus, Georgia, but it's a fair representation of a generic wastewater treatment facility use, plus or minus. So if you look there on the pie chart there, you can see that aeration is a massive part of wastewater treatment energy use. Aeration, anaerobic digestion, and wastewater pumping are three of the largest expenditures of energy along this treatment chain. And so those have been both historically and when we see with funding, key places of intervention in terms of innovation, technological innovation, but also energy conservation. So this example here on the bottom right, you can see this is a very specific type of anaerobic digester that is designed to recover energy through the anaerobic digestion process and use that energy in further wastewater treatment processes in order to reduce total energy loss and use. And so in this Columbus Waterworks example, they installed a first of its kind anaerobic digester to do this, and they were able to save around 19 grand a week and produce more than 9,500 metric tons of CO2 offsets per year. One of the funding sources that we've seen across a variety of case studies in order to do any sort of upgrades to wastewater treatment facilities, be they retrofits, relocations, et cetera, has to deal with state revolving loan funds. And so IIJA is adding an additional 11.7 billion to state revolving loan funds. And we'll see that these become a key piece of funding that, to use a popular term, I've heard a lot with the IRA and IIJA, is you can braid funding from a variety of sources or stack funding together in order to make it go further, match different sources of funding. And so these clean water state revolving loan funds that have just been state revolving funds that have just been increased via IIJA will be really important parts of those processes. Here's a really neat resource that I would definitely recommend folks check out, that they're doing some fabulous work and it's work in process. So things are underway and it seems like a really exciting project. This is through the Department of Energy, Better Buildings, and it's a Sustainable Wastewater Infrastructure of the Future Accelerator Program, or SWIFT program. And it's engaged over 70 facilities, developed tools and resources for these facilities. You can find these online. So if you go to the DOE Swift website, a plethora of information is available for municipalities or private wastewater treatment facility operators, from energy data management and analysis, monitoring, measurement, evaluation, financing options, et cetera. This SWIFT toolkit that they're continuing to build and are doing so through these pilot engagements has been especially successful in a spectacular resource. And they plan to continue to broaden these tools. It's, I believe, a multi-phase project beyond just these two phases. And so now they're expanding to different aspects or different angles at which one can think about climate resiliency in wastewater treatment, be it energy capture, efficiency, resource recovery, et cetera. So highly recommend you all checking out these resources whenever we share our presentation. Another piece of funding that we've seen in a few places that has been braided in some really unique ways across case studies is looking at reclamation or improvement funding for waterways. usually will sit outside of wastewater treatment facility or be used for things certainly beyond wastewater and wastewater treatment. But we've seen some examples where there's been some really unique braiding of funding across different sources of water funding that municipalities or other applicants have been able to successfully put together. So let's look at some examples that we think are kind of unique and might provide insights to wastewater treatment opportunities and climate resilience opportunities on the Gulf Coast of Florida, especially. So here's one from Crested Butte, Colorado. This is just a great case study example that we have the link to through NREL that provides a very clear energy budget and that data management piece of how do we figure out where along these chains of wastewater treatment for a specific facility and the specifics of that plant and that location, quantify the energy use, and then be able to the administrators be able to make informed choices about those potential bottlenecks based on their resources and funding. So Crested Butte was able to work and produce a really robust inventory energy audit of their facility that I think is critical to all of these case studies and to implementing these funding opportunities in a variety of ways. The next case study we looked at very briefly here is in Albertville, Alabama. And they used a combination of a loan and a grant to install this biogas dryer unique to their facility, which has allowed them to save money and use renewable energy in order to reduce energy costs in this facility. Another really interesting example we've come across is right outside of Washington, D.C. And here the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission used an $8.2 million energy efficiency loan to innovate their thermal hydrolysis equipment and infrastructure. And so here we can see that infrastructure installed, the largest advanced treatment plant in the world. And here's the headquarters for the Washington Suburban Commission. Another unique example in Athens, Ohio, and please, we, like I said in all of our presentations we've done, we include resources and things you can follow up on here if you'd like to learn more, and we'll be happy to talk with anyone on the call or listening to this YouTube video if you'd like to reach out and speak with us further. So Athens Wastewater Treatment Facility used tax credits in order to upgrade their wastewater treatment facility, and this is an example of a smaller project, a smaller local government using direct pay tax credits in order to do retrofits and improve their wastewater treatment facility. Two more quick examples from Florida. We wanted to get a couple from the Florida context. And I think there's a third one. We might have three in here. One is Lake Bradford Road Reclamation Facility. Here they were able to add a membrane bioreactor, which we can see here in these images, and reduce energy use by 20% while still meeting their quality standards. Another example of a turbo blower pilot down in Fort Myers. The city tested a pilot project to increase the efficiency of aerobic digestion system to cut energy by about 40%. So we've got the links to here and some other sites and papers you can follow on these as sort of ongoing projects. Unique project for those of you in Florida might be familiar with was the Emerald Coast Utilities wastewater treatment plant. There was a decision that had to be made a few years back on whether this facility should be retrofitted in some way, repaired, or relocated. As you can see in this small inset photo on the top left here, the water line of Hurricane Ivan, I believe, was incredibly close to this wastewater treatment facility, as you can see down here in the center of this photo. And so following that extreme weather event, there was a lot of discussions about how resiliency at this site can be improved. And there was a lot of community participation and stakeholder engagement in this process. On the right here, you can see the timeline of how this treatment facility came together and its relocation processes. And then on the bottom right, you can see the different sources of funding that were braided together in order to relocate the Emerald Coast Utility wastewater treatment facility. This example here is an innovative example coming from the academic literature about potential to capture thermal energy and energy coming through wastewater treatment systems, be it through biosolids or through different processes in wastewater treatment, capturing that energy and using it to reduce the total energy use within the system. There's some really exciting work going on that. We have some links to some academic literature we can include and be happy to share with you, especially around the use of heat pumps in order to capture excess energy coming off of wastewater treatment facility infrastructure. Here we also include a variety of other wastewater resilience funding sources that through an exploration of case studies, we've seen municipalities braid together in different ways. So in quite a number of cases, we've seen under what seems to be a banner of resilience, the use of FEMA and disaster funding to be braided with other sources like EPA or DOE in order to both deal with climate resiliency, prepare for extreme weather events, but in the process, improve the infrastructure of these facilities for things like energy efficiency and conservation. So dual benefits in some of these processes. And so with that, I'll stop there. I don't want to talk too long. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. I want to say a special thanks to our advocacy team, Artis and Ernest, who helped develop this presentation. Our Sarasota office, Amber and Cassidy, who provide us with local knowledge and insights for the Florida Gulf Coast. Our Southface marketing and communications team, who helps put all of these presentations together and keeps us all afloat and make sure we can communicate clearly. And then our funders, the Energy Foundation, and our coalition partners, who we learn so much from through our partnerships and collaboration. So thank you so much for your time. Happy now to take any questions anyone has as best as I can.